Filling in for the Councillor Jo Prothero, who's the chair of this committee normally. She is unwell. May I remind everyone present that this meeting is being live streamed as well as recorded via the internet, and this recording is archived for future viewing. This is the first meeting of this committee conducted under the new hybrid system. As such, may I remind members that they will not be seen or heard unless they press the request to speak button, and then their mic is made active by Democratic Services. However, for the avoidance of feedback or background noise, could all participants please mute themselves when not speaking? If a participant wishes to speak, could they please raise their hand in the room and then press the request to speak button, or if necessary, please use the chat function to indicate they wish to speak. When actively participating, please ensure your microphone and camera are both on EasyConf. Please ensure that all debate is raised verbally and not in the chat function for the sake of the recording and also for public record. If any participant has any issues during the meeting being heard or hearing the meeting at any point, please let me or the Democratic Services Officer know ASAP so that we can get it sorted. Anyone wishing to speak in Welsh at the meeting, could you please indicate before you begin speaking so that members and those online have time to access the translator functions that we have available with us today. On that note, thank you very much. I will begin the meeting with apologies for absence. Do we have any?
Okay, thank you, Chair. Yes, we do have some apologies for absence from Councillor Prothero, the Chair, and Councillor Hamilton. I'm not sure if members have any other apologies they wish to offer.
Thank you very much. Any more? I've been informed that Councillor Wood will be late to the meeting. Any other apologies for absence? No, we'll take that, please. Okay, we'll move on to minutes of the meeting on the 15th of November 2023. Does anyone have comments or questions to raise quickly on this matter? I see no hands, so I'll take a mover, please. Thank you, Councillor Johnson, and a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Hanks. Okay, we will now receive declarations of interest and the nature of such interest, including any whipping declarations under the Council's Code of Conduct. Do we have any interest to declare? I see none. The room? No. Thank you very much then. We will move on to the quarter two sickness absence report. Do we have an officer to take us through that? Tracy Dixon, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. Can you hear me and see me loud and clear?
Yes, we can.
Yeah, good. Okay, thank you. Yeah, so just here to report on the sickness absence report for the last quarter, and we're actually looking at the last 6 months from April 2023 to September. As you will see from, I'm just going to pull out a few kind of key prudent parts of the report, if that's okay, Councillor Goodjohn. So the report does indicate an improved picture based on previous comparison to the previous year. However, it is important to note that all directorates are still tracking or trending above their target, and we are forecasting to be above target at the end of 2024. If I just take you though through to the breakdown of absence, you will see that the key areas for absence from a short-term perspective is viral infection, and from a long-term perspective continues to be stress non-work related. Although I'll just pull up a few kind of key patterns that we are seeing. So there is a kind of underlying and trending upwards of an increase in operations, musculoskeletal, undisclosed, and back problems. We did forecast some of these to an extent, particularly the hospital operations, as aspects opened up over COVID and individuals were able to access operations that perhaps they hadn't been able to during the pandemic period. If we move to section 5 and review our positive health promotions, this is an area that's really key to us. We're actively looking at proactive elements of absence and attendance management, and we continue to review that on a month-by-month basis. So just pull up some key aspects of that. So from our positive health promotions, we've looked at a revised EAP offering. We undertook some work in the previous EAP offering that we had, and some kind of mystery shopper type arrangements, and actually felt that that wasn't offering our employees the best service or providing the best statistical feedback for us in terms of absence management and proactive elements of absence management. So we have entered into a trial period with Westfield Health, and that trial period commenced in November 2023, and we're reviewing that on a month-by-month basis, and due to have some statistical analysis on how that is moving forward for us in January 2024. From a vaccination perspective, that offering has gone very well. So that's the ability for our employees to access a free flu vaccination if they wish to, and we've offered and administered over 1,800 of those to date. We are continuing to look at our digital transformation, to look at how we improve efficiency and effectiveness from an absence and attendance management perspective, and that included a new occupational health booking system, which it's hoped that now we've started to implement that booking system, which is called Cority, that we will free up additional capacity for from an administrative perspective for our GPs and nurses to be able to offer further appointments and reduce any waiting times for our employees to actively see our occupational health teams. We continue to look at health screenings, that's positive health screening, blood pressure, etc., from our occupational health team, and health promotions. We've got a number of health promotions running currently, one being drug and alcohol, and we've most recently done bowel screening, for instance. We've updated our stress management processes and stress management procedures with a view to reviewing absence due to work-related stress, which again is a heavy or strong indicator for us. Those procedures we're rolling out currently and are looking at appropriately training and upskilling our line managers to be able to do those effectively and support our employees who may be going through periods of mental unwellness. Then we've looked at further aspects around reviewing our attendance management policy, and we've recently established a cross-functional group across the organisation to review our attendance management policies and procedures. These have been in situ for some time. They include a number of trigger points where line managers would meet with their employees, both from a wellbeing perspective, but also to review their attendance and any absence that's currently underway. We're very well aware that that's been in situ for some time, actually probably is timely for a review given the upward trajectory of our absence to date, and also what's being reported economically from an absence management perspective, where absence in broader terms across the economy is trending upwards. So that group is due to report back some of their findings and some aspects that they would like to review, revise and consider to our SLT group in the spring of 2024. I note I've got a question or a chat. Sorry, Councillor Goodjohn, I don't know whether somebody wants to come in at that point.
Not that I'm aware of. Please continue.
Okay. So that actually brings me to conclude some of the prudent points that I wish to highlight as part of this report, and just welcome any questions that anybody has. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Tracy. I'm going to bring in members of the committee now. Do we have any comments or questions? Thank you, Councillor Lovelock-Edwards.
Thank you, Chair. Can you hear me okay?
Loud and clear.
Lovely. Okay. Tracy, it's I know the last point that you made about a review being undertaken around managing attendance and performance, and I would assume that this has been welcomed by the trade unions, and good to see that the engagement is taking place. I have to say, and it would be remiss of me not to do so, but in my 20+ years experience of working within the trade union movement, it is pleasing to see the steps that you are taking in terms of the wider health and well-being and financial well-being that you're offering colleagues. And in particular, I think this is something that is sort of relates to the stats that you've provided in terms of demonstrating that a large number or a large percentage of the stress absences are non-work related. So as an employer, I can see that you're going above and beyond what any reasonable employer could be doing to mitigate that. And I'd be interested to hear what the response has been from trade unions on that aspect. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Tracy, would you like to respond?
Yeah, happy to. Thank you, Councillor Lovelock-Edwards. Yes, we are engaging with our trade unions. We work very collaboratively with our trade unions. We have some excellent support from all of the trade union groups, both in terms of schools and corporate. They will be involved in the absence review, and they've actively asked if they could be part of that review as well. We work very strongly, particularly with our corporate groups, when we meet, when absence areas are triggered. They always support us in supporting an employee either with a phased return back to work or looking at alternative arrangements that best suit that individual at that point in time. But I will ask them for further responses in terms of how they feel around the proactive elements of our absence management. I will say they are very involved in any decisions that we take around absence management and the wellbeing offering that we currently offer to all of our employees, as are our network groups. So any policy or procedure change that we have, we engage both our trade union groups and our networks, which includes GLAM and Diverse and our disability network, to get their feedback and contribution as we shape the policies for future. I hope that answers your question, Councillor Lovelock-Edwards.
Your mic seems to be on mute, Councillor Lovelock-Edwards.
Sorry, Chair. It does, Tracy, but may I ask one follow-on question from that?
Yes.
Which is around triggers. It would I'd be interested to learn if under the review, or certainly if it's likely to be on the table, if there is any measures to discount any disability-related absences. So that obviously but for disability, the triggers may not necessarily have been put into motion. So I'd be interested to learn if that is something that you're considering going forward. Thank you.
Are you happy for me to come in, Councillor Goodjohn? Yeah. So we use triggers based on the Bradford factor, and they are our sort of consistency perspective in terms of how we manage our absence. But we would always consider the person at the end of the policy and the procedure. And if it's a recognised disability and we have support from our occupational health team, we would look to discount or review any I'll use the term punitive action, but we would look to review that so that they're not taken into account, if that helps.
Does that answer your question, Councillor Lovelock-Edwards? I'll assume that it does. Do we have any other comments or questions? I see no hands, so I will ask if we will note the report and the sickness absence figures from April to September 2023. I don't believe we have any comments for Cabinet, do we? No. Okay, if everyone's happy, then I'll move we note. Do we have a seconder? Councillor Johnson, thank you very much. I think that was just second. Yeah, that's fine. I will take any objections. No, then we'll move on to the corporate safeguarding summary report. Do we have an officer to take that? Tracy, thank you.
Hi, thanks, Councillor Goodjohn. That's me again. Yeah, so this is our year report in relation to safeguarding. So I'll just take you through very briefly, if that's okay, and just pull out some of the prudent points in relation to this scrutiny committee. So this report has been taken and provides a bit of a composite review of the activity that we're undertaking across all areas of safeguarding. The work of the Corporate Safeguarding Group continues, and they very recently established dashboards. Am I back?
Yes, you are.
Yeah, apologies. I don't know why that cut out. So our corporate safeguarding group have recently established some dashboards that they look to review the strategic activity across the council and the organisation. If I can refer the committee to 2.8 and 2.9, which are two of the areas very relevant to this scrutiny group. So 2.8 is in relation to safer recruitment. The corporate safeguarding group monitor all activity around recruitment and look to ensure that any appointments the council makes are compliant with safer recruitment practices. That's something that the corporate directorates actively manage, and actually from a compliance perspective, we've recently further reviewed that section, added some developments, and our compliance continues to track incredibly high. From a training perspective, which is section 2.9, we've looked at reviewing all mandated training and have brought it in line with the Group A training module now. Again, the Corporate Safeguarding Group will review the activity within this space and the compliance in relation to those that have completed and any gaps that we've got in terms of completion rates. And that groups through their dashboards will then liaise with any line managers to improve compliance and completion rates from a safeguarding perspective across the council. We continue to review our training requirements and are actively trialling further aspects of training to frontline staffing groups who may not have access to our IDEV modules, which is where our safeguarding training is currently based. And school and governor training is supported by the education safeguarding team, and again they review compliance levels from their dashboard perspective and report on any anomalies. So those are the two areas that I just wish to pull out for this scrutiny committee, Councillor Goodjohn, but I'm open to taking any questions if they have.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments from the committee? Councillor Carroll?
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Sorry, could you please try and turn your camera on?
I am trying, and I don't appear to be having much luck, unfortunately.
I'll take you this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Tracy, for the presentation. Just a quick question with regard to compliance. I note that you state it's being monitored. I was just wondering if you had an overview as to the rates of compliance, either by percentage terms, and then following on from that, you briefly hinted at potential anomalies in the system. Do you have any examples of anomalies that have been identified? Thank you.
Are you happy for me to respond, Councillor Goodjohn?
Yes, of course.
Thanks, Councillor Carroll. I'd be more than happy to update on our compliance rates. I don't have the actual percentage for this committee this evening. What I can say in terms of safer recruitment, we had 100% compliance in the last quarter, so no anomalies identified. And from a training perspective, I don't have the accurate data. And from an anomalies perspective, no anomalies reported, but we do still have a gap with compliance-based training that we're looking to close over the next quarter. So, but I will provide further statistical information for you further to this meeting, Councillor Carroll, if that's okay.
Thank you, Tracy. That's very helpful.
Thank you, Councillor, and thank you, Tracy. Do we have any more comments or questions? No, I would simply say at Governance and Audit, we were informed of the delays to the IDEV training, so it's good to see that progress being made. Okay, I will therefore move that we note the report. Can I have a seconder, please? Thank you very much, Councillor Johnson. And any objections to that? I see no indications, so I'll take that as approved. We'll move on to the Q2 Revenue Monitoring Report. Matt, are you taking this one? Thank you. Thank you. 1 second as we prepare for a presentation.
Are you okay for me to proceed? Yeah, thank you. Evening, everybody. I've just got 5-6 slides to present to cover this first of 3 finance papers. So kicking off with the key headlines, what we're continuing to see in Q2 are the pressures that we're starting to highlight at the Q1 monitoring, and they've certainly come through with some strength across that period. So at present, at the council level, there are unplanned use of reserves of £6.8 million, and all of the school reserves pretty much are being used up at £6.5 million. We have done, with a view to improve transparency, set out a revised budget this time, and we've stripped out the corporate recharges for office accommodation and services such as HR, legal, finance, and the contact centre. And that certainly gives readers of our reports a clearer understanding of the costs and spends through the Corporate Resources Directorate, which arguably is possibly understated in the way in which we were reporting previously with those costs charged out across other directorates. The report also takes out some of the steps we've been taking to mitigate these emerging overspends in year, and I'll speak about those in a moment. So the key headlines are the continued pressures that we're seeing in social services, and that's both adult social care and children's and young people's social care. And those, there are a myriad of pressures coming through, both in terms of volume, complexity, and cost. Outside of that directorate, we're also seeing pressures in school transport and highways maintenance. We do thankfully have some mitigations from policy underspends. As you'll see in the previous slide where we showed the unplanned use of social services reserves, that's pretty much exhausted all of the social services reserve. And that we've used some of the policy underspends to make right that position. So this policy underspends against borrowing and additional council tax surplus, and I'll say a couple more words about those when I get into the corporate resources specific elements of this report. There are tighter controls put in place across the whole of the organisation. There's extra scrutiny about recruitment and discretionary spend. And as you'll see in the next item in the agenda, we've had a review of the capital programme in year to free up reserves. And there is also a review of our reserves underway, and that also feeds into the budget for 2024-5. The actual Corporate Resources Directorate is in generally good order. But as I've said, we've amended that budget as part of the Q1 monitoring report, and that the revised budget is set at £17.081 million after the transfer of those corporate recharges. So you can see they did have quite an impact on how we've been reporting corporate resources. The projected outturn for the directorate is good, a positive favourable variance of 300k, that should be. I wish it was £300 million. So apologies for the typo on the slide. And that largely relates to the office accommodation budget. There are some pressures in the directorate. Those are relatively limited and not significant in value. So there have been some delays to the implementation of the savings initiatives around council office space, but they've been mitigated, and indeed we've got a little bit beyond what was needed, but only on a one-off basis. We still need to make the base changes there. We did put significant additional resources in the budget in 23/4 for the coroner services, but their bill has come through at a higher level than that. That's 70k overspend. There are some shortfalls in the legal services income budget, and also in terms of the annual Microsoft licensing cost, where we've gone for a higher level of license that's supported by savings in telephony and other areas of duplication in existing software provision. That's a little bit behind as well. I guess the good news part of this report is on the policy side. So policy, there is a small change to that budget as part of the recharges exercise. So that policy budget is now set at £30.7 million. The forecast outturn at this stage is a favourable variance of £3.4 million. Of that, £2.9 million is meeting those overspends that I've just taken you through, primarily social services, but also transport and highways. There's a specific element of that then that has been allocated against children's services as a priority cost pressure for the 24/5 budget proposals, but we've made that change to the budget in year as well, given the pressures on that service. And certainly the volumes and the complexity of the cases coming forward naturally have an impact on the resources and in the teams managing those children. The three favourable variances. Firstly, in terms of Treasury management investment during this current year, the base rate rises probably higher than we'd anticipated, and indeed we're expecting them to stay at those levels significantly longer as well, despite the pressures that they're putting on the UK economy, and colleagues may have seen the fallback of growth in the latest numbers for October this morning. As in previous years, we continue to use an approach of maximising internal borrowing. Not always that easy at the budget setting stage to forecast the extent to which we'll use this, but obviously an upside for us this year, and that's £1.4 million. And then on council tax, the current projection is that council tax will report sorry, I have pop-ups just to come on my screen. Projection that they'll report a £1 million surplus at year end. That takes into account projected reduced arrears, empty homes premiums and new properties, and changes in allowances. There's a couple of things going on that line in particular. We have the current year council tax we're collecting, and then historical arrears as well. So the in-year position, we had a target that was set when we set the budget of 97.1% collection in year, and the forecast is we'll be very close to that at year end, perhaps a little bit behind. But one of the things we have been pushing on is the recovery of the historical arrears, and that's something that our performance had dipped during COVID and initially post-COVID, but we are having quite significant catch up on that, and that's the main driver for that £1 million. Council overall has, I don't know, it's the first time for a couple of years where there's been a significant savings programme, and the council has been actually performing very well in the delivery of that. 85% delivery so far, but we'll continue to push at that to take it still higher. The reserves, can't talk about the Q2 monitoring without a slide at least on the reserves. So you'll see from this slide there is a significant forecast rundown in reserves, primarily in a planned manner for this financial year. The opening balance was 110 million, currently forecast down at 57. I suspect it'll be a little bit higher once we see the capital programme through to year end. but planned reductions around commitments to funding the capital programme there, and some planned transfers supporting services, and certainly some of those planned smoothing reserves that we built into the budget this year, trying to see us through the pressures in energy and homelessness in particular. But I guess worrying to the right-hand side of this is those unplanned reductions in the social services reserve, and also a significant reduction in reserves held by schools. Just a reminder, the 4 key reasons, there's a couple more I'm sure, that we hold reserves at this level. They are to fund council priorities such as the capital programme, they're to manage known risk, they're to invest in service transformation, and we've set aside budgets around Investor Save, for example, to help deliver the 24/5 and future year budget programmes. And then there are a couple at the bottom of the chart actually that are ring fenced by regulation, so that's schools and the HRA. So those are just a couple of slides to introduce this item, and obviously quite happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Do we have any questions or comments? Dr Ian Johnson, please.
Diolch yn fawr. Dwi'n bwriadu siarad trwy gyfrwng yr iaith Gymraeg, felly cyfle i chi roi eich clustffonau ymlaen. A dyn ni'n gallu cadarnhau bod pawb yn clywed fi yn iawn.
Right. Bear with me, Councillor Johnson. I just want to make sure everyone can pick up on that.
I think I just said that, but yes.
No, thank you. Just to let members know, for those people that are on remote, there is an option on the e-conference to your side, which is audio settings. If you click on audio settings, there will be an option to click on English. That will translate anything that Councillor Johnson says in Welsh. Can I just check if you can access that before we start?
I can, Mark, thank you.
Ydy yn fwy hawdd i'r cyfieithydd dechrau siarad ac felly trwy hynny gall pobl profi os mae'n gweithio iddyn nhw, neu os bydd angen i ni newid y system neu gweithio rwsut gyda phobl gatref i gadarnhau bod y llais yn cael ei clywed gan y cyfieithydd gatref. A oes problemau, Mark? Wyt ti'n gallu clywed fi?
Everything seems fine from this end. The translation is coming through. Are there any members who want to put in the chat or request to speak now that might have any difficulties we try and fix before Councillor Johnson starts properly?
Yn ôl pob sôn, mae pobl angen fwy o sain siwr os mae hynny'n rhywbeth maen nhw'n gallu wneud yn y bocs cyfieithu, neu os bydd angen i'r aelod o'r staff tîm Democratiaeth dod i codi llais fyna.
Right, just to let everyone know, Councillor Johnson speaking to the translator then, we're just sorting out the volume, just to check that the volume is loud enough for everyone. If anyone does have any difficulties, please drop a message in the chat.
Heno wrth gwrs yn prawf i ni gyd, gan fod hwn o'r tro gyntaf dwi'n credu i unrhyw un defnyddio cyfieithydd o Gymraeg i'r Saesneg mewn pwyllgor cyngor Bro Morgannwg, felly dwi'n mynd i barhau siarad cyn i fi cael cadarnhad bod pawb yn iawn a dwi'n gallu parhau gyda'r cyfarfod pwyllgor. Dwi ddim yn siŵr os mae'r cadeirydd yn gallu clywed fi yn iawn, achos dwi'n mynd i ofyn gwestiwn iddo fe cyn fi'n dechrau. For that round, yeah. Okay, allwch chi gyd clywed fi, neu clywed y cyfieithydd. Na, ni'n dal yn derbyn problemau ar-lein.
I think we are good to go, so give it a go.
Yep, okay, so fel dwedais hwn yn prawf, felly gan weld beth sy'n gweithio a beth sy'n ddim yn gweithio, ond gan weld cadeirydd, dwi'n rhoi cadeirydd, mae 'da fi 3 gyfres o gwestiynau, os ti'n fodlon derbyn rein. So dwi'n mynd i dechrau trwy ofyn Matt ynglyn â pethau gofal cymdeithasol, wedyn mae cwestiynau ynglyn â gwariant ar addysg, ac wedyn ar ei cyfrif revenue tai, housing revenue account. Os dwi'n gallu dechrau felly, cadeirydd Matt, trwy ofyn am y gorwariant ar gofal cymdeithasol. Quite tipyn o wers hanes, mae'n bron 20 mlynedd ers i'r cyngor yma'r disgwyl gorwariant o ryw 5 miliwn yn ôl yn 2006, a roedd yna pleidlais diffyg hyder yn y cabinet ar y pryd oherwydd hyn. Eleni ni'n edrych at rhywbeth o gorwariant 8.3 miliwn sy'n digwydd, felly mae yna defnydd o reserves anisgwl gyda ni eleni. Hoffwn gwybod, os bosib, Matt, I baraddau oedd na disgwyl i'r gorwariant yma. Os i'n edrych at paragraff 2.21, mae'n dweud bod 2 miliwn yn cael ei ddefnyddio oherwydd pobl yn cymryd gwasanaeth yn fwy nag oedd disgwyl. Ond oedd wir hyn yn anisgwl I ni. Oedd na, mae pwysau cynyddol ar ofal cymdeithasol yn parhaol, felly oedd ni'n llym ar ran y cyllideb eleni a roedd disgwyl roedd angen fwy o arian yn y base budget. Hefyd, wedyn ni'n edrych at gwariant ychwanegol ar ran gwasanaethau plant, yn enwedig ar ran lleoedd I blant, achos ni'n edrych ar ôl plant fel riant corfforaethol, a mae hwn yn edrych at ar ran oriau gofal ag yn y blaen, hyn yn 3 miliwn, bron 3 miliwn ar gyfer lleoedd I blant fel riant corfforaethol. Mae hyn yn gwariant sylweddol yn uwch nag oeddwn ni'n cynllunio, os nad yw'r arian yma yn mynd mewn i'r base budget ar gyfer y dyfodol, beth yw'r cynlluniau ar gyfer hyn, achos ydy hyn yn rhywbeth sy'n digwydd ar draws Cymru, ydy hyn yn rhywbeth lle ni'n disgwyl rhyw fath o mateb gan lywodraeth yna draft settlement dydd Mawrth nesaf, neu ydy hyn yn rhywbeth sy'n perthyn i'r Brymoganog yn unig. Dwi'n gwybod mae'n nifer o gwestiynau tu fewn, felly os mae Matt yn gallu mateb troi'r narratif gyda ffigurau na fyddi'n gwerthfawrogi. Diolch yn fawr, Matt o cadeirydd.
Please respond, Matt.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. There's quite a lot in there, and rightly so. They're all issues that rightly concern us. You're right to ask about the budget setting and to what extent we could have expected some of these pressures to come through. I think if you cast your mind back to the budget setting that we undertook for 23-4, we directed a really significant amount of additional resource to social services, especially adult social care. And that was the priority in budget setting, alongside putting as much money into our schools as well. And we're also seeing the pressures that they're experiencing. A couple of the specifics, and if I start with children's social care and our ability to forecast accurately what we needed in the budget for the current financial year, the level of increase in volumes of children children needing support far outstrips previous year's experience, and certainly when we reported at the first quarter, and I don't necessarily have the number for this latest report in my head, but we'd seen a year-on-year 33% increase in demand in those services. When you actually now dig into it and look into it, you can understand the reasons for that coming through, but certainly we had no data back in March that were supporting this level of increase. Quite clearly, what we are seeing is the impact of 2 years of lockdown through COVID and reduced intervention in children earlier in their lives that would perhaps have offset some of the need for longer term support. The adults, similarly, we know as a council how difficult in 22-23 financial year it was to recruit domiciliary care support in particular, and potentially that was a risk for the council. In putting the additional resources into social care, that was one of our key considerations. What we did have some doubt about was how quickly the increases in payments rates and travel time, how quickly it would take the market to mobilise for us to be able to bring that resource in. So in setting the budget, we did set £2 million aside in reserves for if that demand or that resource became available during the current financial year. There was strong evidence to support that there would be some significant delay in that, but actually what we've seen is it's come through very quickly, and there's been a quite significant response to our increase in rates and travel time, which, you know, when you look at the care of the adults in the county, is a good thing. I have to say, and we've got the MTFP report coming in a couple of items' time. Actually, I'll go back one step, actually, and it's cold comfort, I guess. But what I am seeing in talking to colleagues in neighbouring councils, and when I have my meetings of the Society of Welsh Treasurers with colleagues across Wales, these pressures that we're experiencing here are certainly not atypical. And there are some authorities in North Wales, and certainly very close to us in South Wales as well, that are seeing pressures outstripping those that we're experiencing. The remark I was then making about the MTFP, and we can talk about this a little bit longer in a couple of items' time. There is significant lobbying from the sector for more resources for social care. I'm sort of not optimistic that we'll see those come through. And obviously in the Chancellor's UK budget, 22nd of November, trails what we should expect, really. No mention of local government, social services at all, or education, and indeed no mention of health in that announcement either. There was headroom that the Chancellor had because of, despite the state of the economy, the actual wage inflation we've seen has given significantly higher revenues for the government, but they've chosen to direct that to national insurance reductions from the start of January. So the sector as a whole is doing significant lobbying. I suspect Welsh Government will struggle to find extra resources to put into this area. Obviously, next Tuesday, Wednesday, a couple of big days for us, with the Welsh Government setting their budget on the Tuesday and announcing it on the Wednesday. But I am pessimistic as to what we might see from that.
Thank you. Councillor Johnson, follow-up?
Ie, diolch yn fawr. Os wy'n gallu symud ymlaen i'r cwestiynau ynglyn â'r ysgolion. Naeth yn ystod y cyllideb eleni roedd na targed arbedion 2.75 miliwn, ond mae'r ffigurau yn dangos bod na gorwariant o'r cronfa ysgolion a'i hunain gan rhyw 6 miliwn. A wy'n cyfarwydd gyda'r rai o'r ffigurau yma, achos dwi wedi bod i sawl cyfarfod yn ystod y gyfres o pwyllgorau crafu yma, i o bod mae'n dros 20 o ysgolion mewn dyled eleni, a mae rhan helaeth ohonyn nhw, 19 dwi'n credu, heb unrhyw ffordd o dod nôl mewn i credit. Felly, wyt ti'n gallu esbonio sut mae hyn yn mynd i, sut ni'n mynd i ddatrys y problemau ynglyn â hynny. Just fel pwynt arall, just tu fewn y sgwrs yma am ysgolion, mae yna yn yr adroddiad, mae cyfuniad o materion ynglyn â anghenion ychwanegol plant wrth Whitmore a Hafan. A maen nhw wedi rhoi hyn mewn i'r un paragraff ac adnoddau yn gwain y nant, a mae'n help ar ran bod yn tryloyw i'r ddau pethau cadw ar wahân mewn adroddiadau yn y dyfodol os bosib. Felly cadw'r anghenion ychwanegol ar wahân i anghenion iaith Gymraeg. Bydd hwn yn help i fi ar ran tryloi y deb. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Matt, would you like to respond?
So certainly education is equal in concern as social services pressures for us. Again, just to take us back to budget setting a little bit, the council has strived very hard to put all of the resources to meet the school's pressures into the school's budget. The final settlement from Welsh Government, the increase in their notional funding levels for school sector was only 5%. The council actually put 10.5% in, some coincidentally roughly £10.5 million. However, we did anticipate that we would see some pressures in schools with a £2.75 million. Pre-COVID, levels of reserves in schools had been falling for a number of years, and they were probably down at £1 or £2 million just before COVID. There was considerable extra resource directed towards schools during that period, and we saw the reserves increase to £12 million over that period. They've reduced £6 million last year, and we've seen a further £6 million reduction in this year, and the prospects for the future don't look at all good. The team in the department and colleagues in my finance teams have been working really hard with schools to try and help them and support them in balancing their budgets. But as you say, Councillor Johnson, we do currently have 19 schools who have submitted deficit budgets without any recovery plans. We are in a bit of a state of limbo with those schools, in all honesty. I'm not in a position as 151 officer to sign their budgets off because they're not putting forward recovery plans. But equally, I know the challenges they have in trying to balance the budgets and deliver a meaningful curriculum to the pupils. We're managing it best we can, and at the moment, we've written to those schools and saying that we will continue to monitor the position and work with them. It is an issue that is going to be really tough to try and resolve.
Councillor Johnson, can I ask you if you follow up on those questions? And if not, then I'll bring it over to other members of the committee first before asking your third.
Dwi'n mynd i ddilyn lan y pwynt yna, sef ynglyn â'r ysgolion mewn dyled. Beth yw'r sefyllfa statudol ynglyn â hynny? A oes angen iddyn nhw dod ymlaen gyda chyllideb sy'n cydbwyso ac erbyn pryd, neu fel ti'n dweud, beth yw gwir ystyr state of limbo? I mean, beth yw'r datrysiad i'r sefyllfa yna os ni'n sôn am 19 o ysgolion? Dwi'n cofio bod yn aelod pwyllgor cyllid ysgol uwchradd yn y gorffennol. Ond mae, so un ysgol yn wynebu problemau, 2 ysgol yn wynebu problemau, ti'n gallu gwneud hyn un wrth un, ond 19 yn swnio fel llwyth o adnoddau yr adran yn mynd mewn i ddatrys problemau sydd bosib heb ddim bosib i ddatrys yn y tymor byr. Beth yw'r ymateb i hyn? Sorry.
Thank you, Matt.
So we effectively do have a structural issue that is going to be really tough to work through. There are the funding regulations for schools and our local scheme, and under that scheme, schools have until the 30th of June to present us with a balanced budget that I and my statutory role need to sign off. In terms of sanctions or actions, then the legislation does have provision for the local authority to step in and manage those schools' budgets, but quite clearly we're not going to do that for 19 schools, and it's unlikely, even if we stepped in one or two, that we'd remedy the position themselves. And I, similar to you, in previous existence when I was Oxfordshire County Council, we took a delegation from a school as part of an intervention board, effectively replacing the governors and manage their budget for them. But that's not something that there is an option here. In this day and age, also there wouldn't be the capacity in the department anyway, and that's why I use the word limbo, and it's not perhaps the most technical or helpful word in this set of circumstances. But we are at a little bit of an impasse, and it is going to be, as I say, very difficult to manage through this and move those schools to a sustainable position in the short term.
Thank you, Matt. I'm going to first ask for other members of the committee if they have questions or comments. No? Okay, fine. Councillor Johnson then.
Diolch, Cadeirydd. Mae hyn yn cwestiwn lot llai cymleth. Mae'n am yr cyfrif revenue tai, achos mae'n disgwyl hwn, cofio hwnnw adroddiad chwarter 2 sef 6 mis hyd at mis Medi, ond mae'n disgwyl yn ôl yr ystadegau yma i ni gwario 15.5 miliwn o'r cyfri revenue tai allan o'r 16.5 miliwn. Ydy hyn yn debyg i ddigwydd yn ystod y flwyddyn eleni, neu ydyn ni'n disgwyl rhyw lithriad ar ran yr arian, achos mae hyn wrth gwrs yn bob pwrpas yn cyfri cyfalaf yn lle un revenue, a felly mae'r disgwyl o'r y balans maen nhw'n amcangyfri ar gyfer blwyddyn nesaf fydd yn lot uwch na sydd yn yr ystadegau yma. Felly mae hyn yn bwyd o troi maint sydd yn y reserves yn gyffredinol. Diolch.
Matt.
You're entirely correct with your general summary of the position on the HRA and the relationship with the capital programme. We do have the capital programme on the agenda this evening, and we also took the HRA mid-year position to Cabinet and the relevant Scrutiny Committee earlier. The forecast we do have in front of us at the moment is that they will deliver the capital programme as described. We did last year see, we took a couple of opportunities to reschedule the capital programme, and certainly up till Christmas there was some drawing back on the housing development programme in particular. And I certainly was one that was a little bit sceptical of how much they were going to deliver by the end of the year, but actually they came in, and we actually had to pull back some of the resources that we'd set aside in 23/4 for them to complete the work. So in saying some of this, I'm just setting out how difficult it is to forecast the delivery of the capital programme. What they're telling us at the moment is that they will deliver the capital programme as it is currently set out. I wouldn't be surprised if there was some slippage before year end. And whilst it's not something that we've talked about in some of our capital monitoring previously, we've had 6 weeks of significant rainfall and adverse weather, and I'd be really amazed if that didn't have an impact on delivery of some of the schemes within our capital programme.
Thank you, Matt. I am wondering, because later on we're discussing the capital monitoring report, there is a new builder slippage of £3.5 million. Is that going to affect, has that been considered as part of this revenue monitoring account? And also early on you described about social services, about pressures being similar in other councils here in South Wales and in Wales as a whole. Did we budget similar to other councils for the level of in-year pressures that we predicted, or have we been the only ones that have been caught out by these in-year pressures?
So I'll need to double check on the HRA, but the intention when we brought all these, is my mic on? Yeah, sorry. We've purposely brought, and it was quite a undertaking for the team, 5 financial reports together at the half year. Last year we were a bit out of sync with our reporting, and some of these came forward at month 4 or 5 rather than 6. We purposely brought them in sync so they should be in sync. But I will go in, double check and make sure that this number does reflect the slippage that we're reporting in the capital report. On the social services pressures across Wales, I'm only aware of the headline numbers. They are overspends, so they are overspending. But the nature of those overspends and why they've occurred, I don't know, and there may be different factors at play to those that are impacting on our spend.
Fine, thank you. A written email to the committee would suffice. Thank you so much. Any more questions or comments from the committee? I see none. Therefore, I will ask that we note the current position of the budget and that we note the revised budget with the comments that has been raised by Councillor Johnson going to the Cabinet. Can I have a seconder for that? Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Any objections to that? I'm seeing none, so thank you very much. We will move on to a reference from Cabinet, the Capital Monitoring Report from the 1st of April to the 30th of September. Matt, thank you.
We have a few more slides to share on this item as well. I'll just wait for them to go up. So the first slide is a snapshot of the capital programme at a council level. The approved programme, including the carry forward of slippage from 22-3 financial year, is £129 million. And that is certainly a higher capital programme than the one we ended up delivering last year. So there is the potential for some slippage throughout the rest of the year. And it's easy to make that comment at a general level. At a more specific level, it is trickier in that the service managers are telling us that they're delivering programmes and they're doing the best to get that investment into the county. Having said that, there is slippage requested of £18.8 million, and that'll be slipped into the 24-5 programme. And it's again, pretty much as we've said last year, what we will do, we won't just slip that into the 24-5 programme and have enlarged 24-5 first year. We'll need to review schemes in 24-5 and make sure that we've got the capacity to deliver that updated programme. The spend at the half year is £26 million. That would give some cause for concern around the delivery of the programme to the end of the year, but it's typical at this stage of the year that you wouldn't have 50% of those schemes spent. Obviously, the main expenditures come through as schemes complete. As I've sort of trailed in the revenue report, we've got a number of actions in place to mitigate spending in pressures in revenue, and certainly we've had a review of the capital programme to at least bolster the council's reserves and provide some cover for risks going forward, given the movement in reserves during the current year. we've focused on schemes that aren't grant funded, that are primarily funded from council resources, be they reserves or potentially borrowing, and that review has freed up £5.5 million of resources that can go back into reserves. So a comprehensive piece of work and much needed. That review does impact on a couple of schemes that were in the capital programme that are under the remit of this committee. So a couple of schemes in the ICT allocation, the Stronger Communities grant that from 2024-5 to 28-9 capital programme. That Stronger Community grant fund, this a revenue and a capital element, and typically the capital element hasn't been committed, so minimum impact there. This part of the work that we're doing that you've just seen in the revenue report about the rationalisation of office accommodation, that was possibly going to duplicate work with refurbishment work, so it doesn't make sense to refurbish when we're reassessing the use of our property. So that's that civic offices toilet refurbishment's been taken out of the programme, and also in respect of iClear, the our space programme that's part of the property rationalisation as well. There's 61k that's come out, but that does leave resource in future years of the programme to complete that work. There's also a couple of schemes in the body of the report to increase the budget for refresh the network infrastructure in C1V, and also to amend the scheme budget for ash dieback and replanting for 23-4 to 25-6. And finally, there is a slippage that is under the remit of this committee, and that's the reprofiling of the City Deal scheme budget. So colleagues in the Cardiff Capital Region keep us updated. I go to a monthly meeting with them on the progress of schemes, and there's a reprofiling that needs to take place here. And that is driven by the need to align and reprofile in line with the work on the UK government capital funding and the likely drawdown of funding for the investment schemes in that overall programme of work with City Deal. So those are the capital headlines for this committee.
Thank you very much, Matt. Do we have any comments or questions from the committee? Councillor Johnson.
Diolch yn fawr. Dwi'n rhoi eiliadau I chi, rhoi eich clusfonau ymlaen eto yn yr ystafell cyn I fi dechrau. Diolch yn fawr, Matt, am y gyflwyniad fyna. Ychydig o gwestiynau, ychydig o bethau I nodi gyda fi. Yn gyntaf oll, llongyfarchiadau am ddenu grant mewn ar gyfer y cynllun adnewyddu'r ddawan, Restore the Thaw, ac ar gyfer canolfan chwaraeon Colcut. Ydy e'n bosib gwybod pryd yn union mae'r cynllun adnewyddu'r ddawan yn dechrau fel raglen cyfalf, achos mae'n rhan o'r adroddiad yma fel chwarter 2, ond os ni newydd wedi ennill y grant, sa'n gwybod beth yw'r profil am hyn. So hwn o'r gwestiwn gyntaf sydd I fi. Os fi'n gallu bwrw ymlaen just I sôn am yr adolygiad o raglen cyfalaf sydd gyda ni. 2 pwynt hoffwn godi. Un yw ynglyn ag adnewyddu goleuadau ysgol Sant Curig a'r disgwyl I hyn cael ei ariannu gan mae cyllideb dadgarbeneiddio yn y dyfodol, a beth yw'r tebygrwydd o hyn yn ddigwydd, a beth yw effaith cael gwared o hyn o'r cynllun cyfalaf presennol, os sa'n gwybod os bydd Matt yn gallu ateb y cwestiwn, os bydd rhywun arall yn gallu. Oes modd deall fwy am y gwaith ar Cosmiston Lodge, achos does dim esboniad o'r cynllun yn yr adroddiad yma, ac yn olaf, os dwi'n gallu, a dwi'n gallu troi nôl at pwynt oedd Matt yn codi am ail broffil gwariant cyfalaf y fargen ddinesig a'r llithriad fan'na. Wnaeth cynghorydd Hooper codi hyn neithio. Mae yna tipyn o newid, so mae'r profil presennol o gyfrlenni yw gwariant 2.5 miliwn, ond dim ond 300,000 sydd yn yr un sydd wedi cael ei adolygu, gyda'r gwariant yna yn cael ei gyrru ymlaen tan diwedd y degawd. Mae'r un, baron yr un arian sydd yn y cronfa dros 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, bron 10 mlynedd o wariant, ond yn lle hyn yn cael ei gwario i gyd mewn 3 mlynedd ar ddechrau'r raglen, mae hyn yn cael ei rannu a draws bron 10 y wariant, a mae hyn angen bach fwy o esboniad na'r un sydd gyda ni erbyn hyn. Dwi'n deall o'r sgwrs neithio mae yna diweddariad yn dod i falle i'r pwyllgor yna, ond sa'n siŵr os oes modd i rannu'r gwybodaeth gyda cynghorwyr i gyd, gan bod hwn yn newid eitha sylweddol o ran gwariant a'r profil dros cyflodaeth y hir. Diolch yn fawr.
Matt, please.
Thank you. So I think there's 6 things to cover off there. The Restore the Thaw, yes, indeed, really good news. And the council, through the money it set aside in its Project Zero reserve, was able to use a relatively small amount of money to leverage in quite a significant grant. I think we just, from recollection, I think we had to put only about 10% in. What I don't have, though, is the profile of the spend. And I'll need to get back to you on that point, as indeed I will, unfortunately, on a couple of the other questions you've answered, and I apologise for that. I wasn't quick enough getting the name of the school down. St Currig. So I'll need to do you the lighting and the use of the decarb budgets. I've written that down, so I've got enough detail there to get back to you. Similar with Cosmiston Lodge. I spoke to a colleague in the team today about the city deal, so aware that you require more information on that. Didn't have time to look into it this afternoon, but certainly when we do the reply for yesterday's scrutiny committee, we'll make that information available to other scrutiny members as well. That's no trouble at all. And yes, you're right, there's been quite a reprofiling and moving of those budgets, so quite understand the request.
Thank you, Matt. Any other questions or comments from members of the committee? Give it a second. No. Okay, fine. In that case, I will move that we note the report. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Johnson, provided obviously those questions are answered. Thank you. In that case, we will move on unless there are any objections. No, then to the refresh of the medium-term financial plan. Matt, please.
Thank you. So final 4 slides from me of the evening. And a couple of these we've used in the member training, so apologies to colleagues who've seen some of these previously, but they are really important in talking about this report and the challenges that we face. And the first one I really have put up in terms of the planning cycle, just to emphasise how much time and effort colleagues put into planning the budget, and how tough a process it is. And I know colleagues on SLT would probably share that sentiment with me. We spent a huge amount of time on the budget with them over the last year. Certainly a case that you've barely set the budget back in March, and you're already starting to work on the 24/5 budget, reviewing the assumptions that we made back in March in the second year of the plan, and seeing how quickly the position moves. And indeed, the pay award offers from the employers were made probably just a couple of days after we'd agreed our budget. So assumptions we'd already made, some movement from. So quite a lot of work over the spring and early summer to enable us to pull the financial strategy together, which really is your starting point for budget setting. At that point, we weren't in a position to significantly update the assumptions we'd made in March for year 2 of the existing plan, but we certainly set out the principles and the approach and the timescales for budget setting for 24/5 and indeed the medium-term financial plan to 28/9. Then what we've done across the summer and early autumn is had a significant review of the cost pressures we were experiencing, and given the conversation we've just had about the Q2 monitoring and the conversations we've had about social care, needless to say that our assumptions about spend in those areas significantly increased. We did set internally a deadline of the start of September to have a first cut of those numbers. That tied in with work that was also been done by the Society of Welsh Treasurers, and what we're seeing in the Vale are pressures very, very similar to what the colleagues are experiencing across the rest of Wales. We'd originally intended in our planning that we'd come with a review and refresh in October. That was a little bit later. We came to Cabinet on the 16th of November, and I'll go through some of those highlights at the moment. We're now into the bottom right-hand corner of the cycle. We're formulating savings and looking at proposals to balance the budget, and that's going to be a pretty tough ask. We've have the settlement from Welsh Government next week, and essentially I then have till about the 28th of December to pull together a first cut of the budget report that will form the basis of the consultation with the community and scrutiny committees. That goes to Cabinet on the 18th of January, and that starts a 4-week consultation period. We have been doing work on life in the Vale, and that will certainly inform that piece's work as well. But I'm quite conscious that 4 weeks for public consultation isn't as much as I'd like to give, but given the challenges that we're having, that's probably the best we can do at the moment. And then we'll come back to Cabinet with a final budget on the 29th of February, and that'll be an approval on to the full council on the 6th of March. So a really big challenge and a real large amount of work still to be done. I do want to talk about the financial strategy, but won't go into too much detail. It does emphasise some of the points that I've made already. And I guess sometimes when you have such financial challenge, you do get away from the overall principles, and the budget isn't for itself. The council has a plan, its corporate plan, and we need to put the resources behind that. It does mean that we have to focus on supporting the most vulnerable, and that is quite a large population and breadth of the services that we provide now. When you think about adult social care, children's social care, homelessness, and also wanting to put resource into schools, especially where we see growing demand in additional learning needs. And that does remind me, I've missed out one of Councillor Johnson's earlier questions, and we will give you that split in the report between ALN and Welsh resource. It's really important that we have sustainable finances, and what we are attempting to do is have a twin track with the budget this year. We've also got a big job, we've got a big job to balance the 24/5 budget, but what we are actively doing is carving out capacity to have a look at transformation and how we change services going forward so that we have the sustainable finances. We're doing best to hang on to the reserves. I think that earlier chart on the revenue monitoring shows how quickly reserves will decline. You can only use them once, and what we can't use them to do is underpin the base budget. We need them in there to cover the risks that we're experiencing at the moment, and those are significant. It's going to be a real difficult job to set the council tax this year. The council has two core funding sources: Welsh Government grant and council tax. In the current year, they're £290 million. 30% of that is through council tax. And what we've seen through austerity is a growing dependence on council tax. Just back in 2015-16, council tax was about 26.5% of our overall funding. Fees and charges, we've stuck at the strategy from last year. We need to ensure that we're delivering discretionary services that we cover cost, and there will be a need to increase charges in line with September CPI. There's collective responsibility to manage the finances. What I've seen from this committee is really good engagement in the scrutiny process, and I need to make sure that happens across all of our committees, and that we do have a really strong challenge and engagement on the modelling we're doing of cost pressures, our assumptions around funding, and the deliverability of the proposals when they come forward. We seek to have the most accessible and transparent finances as possible, and I continue to talk to Cabinet members and scrutiny members to make sure that we're presenting the finances in the most accessible format, avoiding jargon and being very open with our finances. And finally, this is a message more that I give to colleagues than perhaps committee meetings, but we do, in everything we do, need to be ensuring best value, and at the core of that is actually looking outside when we're setting budgets. How do other councils deliver services? Are there different ways of delivering services? But also in the day-to-day compliance and making sure that colleagues comply with contract procedure rules, financial regulations, so that we're commissioning and procuring in the most effective manner. I guess this slide is a direct lift from the report, and it's a very sobering read. There is an overall gap in 24/5 of £10.5 million, and that is after a considerable amount of work has been done on the budget across the late summer and early autumn. The underlying pressures that we're experiencing are in the order of £38 million, unprecedented in recent years, driven primarily through inflation, but also some of those volume and complexity issues that I spoke about earlier as well. What we can't do is set a budget with putting that level of pressure in. We'd never come up with a savings programme to match it. So we've had quite a brutal review of cost pressures with directors and taken some hard decisions already. We're not able to fund all of our forecast levels of pay awards, so there will be built-in efficiencies for services to deliver already. There are going to be some really tough discussions to be had with care providers. We're at the moment only putting the same level as the grant increase into social services, so there'll be some really tough negotiations there. Some of our director colleagues, such as those for corporate resources, know this remit, and environment and housing have seen very little of their pressures coming forward, so they're having to take measures already to mitigate those and make sure that those don't come through as overspends next year. So it is going to be a very high risk budget that we're setting. And I guess when you look at the balancing item for the pressures, it's only £10 million of additional funding for 24/5, and that's having remodelled our assumptions on council tax from earlier in the summer. So that's assuming a 5% increase in council tax. Government grant, we've still got it at 3%, which is the second year of the settlement that we had in March. And as I already said this evening, prospects for doing better than that are really slim, despite the fact that Welsh Government, unlike UK Government, has attempted to project health and social care and local government in general during the sort of 12, 13 years of austerity. So a tough position that we're facing. Next steps, I've talked a little bit about the UK government budget that we had on the 22nd of November already this evening. So that's quite disappointing is perhaps an understatement, isn't it? Welsh Government will set their budget on the 19th and that'll be published on the 20th. Certainly if anything, last year's anything to go by, we only had a few snippets and indications of which that way was looking 2-3 days in advance. And I guess when we have such a late UK government budget, it does make their position tight to actually come forward with their settlement in good time as well. So as I've just said then, in the cycle, we'll have the budget for consultation start of January, and then the draft and final budget coming to Cabinet and Council end of February, start of March. Job, thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Questions or comments from members of the committee, please? Councillor Johnson.
Diolch yn fawr, Dirprwy Cadeirydd, a diolch yn fawr Matt am y cyflwyniad. Wrth gwrs, fel dwedais ti, ni wedi gweld nifer o'r pwyntiau yma yn cyflwyniadau gynghorwyr dros yr wythnosau diwethaf, a wrth gwrs mae hyn wedi bod yn cabinet eisoes. O'n i jyst yn mynd i godi ychydig o bethau. So just i gadarnhau, mae disgwyl i ni glywed setliad llywodraeth lleol dydd Merch yr wythnos nesaf, achos mae disgwyl i popeth arall digwydd ar y dydd mawr. So o'n i jyst yn mynd i gadarnhau bod fy nealltwriaeth o beth dwedais ti yn iawn, bod mae'n mynd i osod gyllideb drafft dydd Mawrth, o'n i'n mynd i gael dealltwriaeth, gwybodaeth, y setliad llywodraeth lleol ar ddydd Mercher. So hwn di un cwestiwn. O'n i'n mynd i just i ofyn a ba sail wnaethoch chi roi ffigwr cynnydd 5% fel chwyddiant cyfflog. Does dim unrhyw ffigwr arall gyda fi, ond just eisiau clywed beth oedd yr ysymeg tu ôl hyn. Pwynt oedd gyda fi just tu fewn yr adroddiad am gaffael. Dwi'n gwybod mae'r cadeirydd cynghorydd Prothero yn arbenigedd yn y maes, ond ac efallai dwi wedi methu cyfarfod lle wnaethon ni trafod hyn, ond mae'n sôn paragraff 2.72 ynglyn â gweithio ar y cyd gyda chyngorau eraill megis Caerdydd, Sirfynwy a Thorfaen, a ni'n just gofyn os oes yna beth yw'r sefyllfa yna, wnaeth hyn dechrau, neu ydy hyn yn rhywbeth sydd ar y gweill. Just i gwblhau, gan fod yn yr adroddiad yma, mae'n tipyn bach fwy o wybodaeth am yr cwestiynau oedd ni'n holi yn gynharach am wariant ar anghenion ychwanegol sydd yn helpu fi deall beth yw'r buddsoddiad mewn uned trochi plant ysgol gynradd Gymraeg, a beth yw'r gwariant sydd wedi cael ei roi mewn fan hyn fel pwys ar gyfer awtistiaeth a gobryder ymysg plant mewn ysgolion iaith Gymraeg. So wy'n gallu gweld y gwahaniaeth rhwng y ddau fan hyn, ond oedd e ddim yn amlwg yn yr adroddiad blaenorol sut oedd hyn yn cyd-fynd gyda'n gilydd ar gwariant yn y sector Saesneg. Mae'n helpu fi i ddeall y gwahaniaeth a nid jyst cael hyn i gyd cael ei lympo mewn gyda'n gilydd. So os oes unrhyw modd i gael hyn nid cweit ar wahân, ond i ddangos gwahaniaeth ar gwariant, sydd wrth gwrs yn angen reidiol tu fewn y system Gymraeg, os dyw hwn ddim wedi cael ei gwario naill yn ei trochi, neu ar gyfer iechyd meddwl ac yn y blaen ar gyfer plant yn y system addysg Gymraeg. Mae hyn yn helpu fi gyda troiloedeb a gyllideb sydd o flaen ni. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. Matt?
So there's always a little bit of perhaps confusion's too strong a word about the timing of the settlement. We're told that they decide on the 19th and it's published on the 20th. Typically, and I think it's probably likely that we'll have the detail on the Tuesday afternoon, evening. So we'll perhaps know a bit earlier than the 20th, but only marginally. The wage inflation, that's quite a big call to try and forecast what that is. That's an initial estimate at a point in time. It's not. We've sort of sense checked it across colleagues across Wales, and that piece of work that I talked about that we were doing with the Society of Welsh Treasurers, we're in the same ballpark as everyone else is forecasting. We obviously had the flat rate of 1925 in the current year. There is talk that it's not going to be at that level. But when you look at the protracted negotiations on the pay award that we had in this year, and it's only just going into people's pay packets in December, that could be a bit of a long running one again, especially when you look at the backdrop of where we are with inflation persisted really high into the late summer, early autumn, before dipping a bit at September, so down to 6.7. So you could see that being a sort of negotiating point, but obviously more recently down at 4.8, and it does have potential to dip into the early in the new year and spring at the time some of those negotiations are being held. So it's virtually impossible to call, isn't it? I don't think we're going to be too far adrift. Procurement, that's a piece of work in progress. So we have, as a council, had limited procurement capacity, which is why we've gone forward with the shared service arrangements with Ardal, and two of the partners in that, Monmouthshire Torvine, having similar resource to us that they've brought into the equation, a stronger team in Cardiff. We've given them 2 or 3 early deliverables that we would like from them. One is the comprehensive contract register and forward plan. I'm expecting that in the next few days. It's taken them a bit longer than I'd hoped to pull that forward. But what we will be doing with that, and it's going to have more of an impact in 25, 6 and future years budget, that we will have a really clear forward plan, and we'll take that on a regular basis to our insight board, so that we'll be looking at renewal of contracts a year, 15 months out, so that we can have those proper conversations around reprocure, deliver internally, or other means of delivering those sorts of services. So that's work in progress. It'll serve us in the long term, but I don't think we'll see too much of it featuring in the budget for 24/5. And I note your comments about the airline again. We'll make sure we monitor in the same way as we pull the budget together to make sure that there's that clarity.
Thank you, Matt. I'm just going to ask if Councillor Johnson wants a follow-up. No. Any other? Yes, Councillor Lovelock Edwards.
Thank you. Matt, taking into consideration the significant pressures on the council, and increasingly so today as we hear that the economy has shrunk back, I think in October, November, and as the UK government sadly focuses more on votes than on budgets, what steps will you be able to take to look at, wherever possible, external sources of funding? I think it was mentioned in following a question from Councillor Johnson on the ability of this council to secure external funding. And I'm just interested to know what priority will be given to that now to safeguard as many of the services that we've introduced as possible to look after those who are most vulnerable in our society and our communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Matt.
It's certainly the case that the council's been really successful in bringing in grants and external funding, and that's certainly the case with the school development programme, for example, and the Explore the Thaw that we just talked about. But those grants are predominantly supporting investment in their capital. We don't really see so many grants coming in that support our revenue and day-to-day running costs of the council. But colleagues are successful in bringing grants into the council, and they'll continue to do that, and ideally bring in some revenue ones as well. But those continuous ongoing sources of finance and funding are really hard to come by. So I think we'll continue to see the grants coming in for capital, but I'm less optimistic about the revenue ones.
Thank you, Matt. Any others from members of the committee? No, I will just make a couple of questions then. One to follow up on procurement. I'm aware that the service agreement that we've made with other councils, all councils involved with that have pledged to net zero by 2030, as we have within their organisations. Has any consideration been taken yet within the budget setting for extra procurement funding for sustainable sources of procurement in order to reach our net zero target? I know this is going to be a subject of our task and finish group, but I didn't see anything within the budget pressures for that. I wonder if consideration should be made for that. Additionally, I wanted to ask very quickly around the B&B for those who are homeless, showing that rough sleeping is a policy choice, but it is an expensive policy choice. Almost 1.5 million pounds. This is set to, well, eventually be ended, this budgetary pressure, within 3 years after that. Can you give me a bit more of a rundown as to why the consideration has been made that budgetary pressure would be gone by 26, 27, I believe? No, I do apologise, 27, 28.
So in terms of resources to support the zero carbon commitments, the main resources that we've identified to date are the reserve that we set aside as part of the review of reserves last year. That, as you've rightly said, there are no significant project zero or carbon reduction proposals in the revenue, albeit there is money in the capital programme to support that ambition. It is, at this time, it's going to be a challenging ambition to divert the resources to when we're under such overall overall straitened financial position. But the officers are continuing to look at exploring ways of developing that. Through Ardle, one of the things we do have now that we've set up is an internal distribution list to all of our colleagues involved in commissioning procurement services, and there are guidance notes coming out from Ardle that sort of give some direction and support in the way in which they procure, and on a day-to-day basis how we can be more sustainable in our procurement. So there are activities in place around, certainly perhaps more around the margins. The homelessness question's a really tough one, and not necessarily because it's technically difficult, but because of the costs involved and the strategies that are sitting behind trying to reduce the costs to the council. the head of service, Mike Ingram, has a strategy in place that was agreed last year to create primarily to create extra provision in the council so that we can house people more efficiently. And there is progress made in that, and obviously the development in the HRA play into that as well, and that's why that's such an important strategy. But we still have 80 people at the Hilton Express International at significant cost, and the finding alternative arrangements for those is going to be a real challenge for the council.
Thank you, Matt. I do see that Councillor Burnett is requested to speak. I'm just going to ask the committee if they're happy to allow Councillor Burnett to speak. Another objection? No objection. Okay, in that case, I'll ask her to turn her camera on and therefore to speak.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Thank you. I'm actually contributing as the Cabinet member responsible today, but as Matt's done such a fabulous job, there was little to add. However, I think the one thing that I would mention is when we were just discussing about the council's success in attracting external funding. This actually sometimes can be a challenge. Things like Restore the Thought, absolutely brilliant. We've just had some public service board funding to fund an officer to work with 3 of our more deprived communities to do sort of a mapping of the areas and their needs. And I think that quite often we will then have, when we're setting budgets, well, why are you doing that? Why didn't you use that money on potholes? Is normally the type of comment. And I think that there is a responsibility on all of us to help sort of residents to understand the difference between sort of core funding and the funding that we get both from Welsh Government, which is the majority of our funding, and then the council tax funding that comes alongside that. How that plays out, how that mainly goes on to our statutory services, and then where everything else fits in. And this is something that we've been talking about a lot, because it's when we're getting to budget setting, it is really, really difficult to be as clear and as transparent as we would. Well, I mean, we'll certainly be transparent, but as clear, cutting out jargon, etc., to help people understand exactly what the situation of the budget is and how we're fixing all those bits of the jigsaw together to achieve an overall budget. But as I said, I think we need to recognise that while it's valuable, external funding doesn't meet it doesn't meet our core needs, and actually we have to be careful it doesn't take officer resources away from core business. So just wanted to clarify that, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Burnett. I'm going to take any last contributions from members of the committee. I see none. So I am going to move the recommendations, if I can just confirm them very quickly. That we note that we have reviewed the mitigating cost pressures and any comments be referred on to Cabinet. I wonder if comments regarding procurement can be forwarded on to Cabinet, and also regarding ALN and Welsh schools budget pressures from Councillor Johnson. Fine, okay. Just the procurement stuff. Any other comments, just to confirm I've not missed anyone out? No, fine. In that case, I will move that. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Johnson, thank you very much. Any objections? I don't see any, therefore I'll take that as carried. Thank you very much. We will move on to report of the Director of Corporate Resources. Do we have him on the line?
Yes, Chair.
Thank you very much. So for the annual delivery plan monitoring report Q2, I bring in Tom Bowring.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. Good evening, committee. Thanks very much indeed for taking this report. As you said, this is the Q2 position in terms of the delivery of the Council's annual delivery plan. Before I start going through some of the high-level details, members will note that this is a slightly more summarised version of the performance report than you would traditionally have. We've had some capacity issues in the last couple of months within the performance team. I'm pleased to report that there is decent progress being made in getting some additional capacity back into that team, but that's the reason why this report is a little bit more summarised. However, of course, all the detail has been collected and will be reported in full in Q3. So the report itself has got an Appendix A, which, as usual, provides you with an overview in terms of what we've achieved within the remit of the Scrutiny Committee across the last quarter, and just putting out some of the highlights of that for you. Really pleasing that we have achieved the age-friendly application. The World Health Organization confirmed their approval for our application in consultation with a series of other partners for that, and there was a very successful launch event held recently that I know a number of elected members have attended. There's been continued work, and the leader just referred to this in terms of the work with the PSB in terms of tackling deprivation and also food insecurity. Pleasing to see the work within Llantwit Major in the More Than Food Hub continuing to perform really strongly. And Tracy has updated you in terms of some of the people-based activity earlier on in your agenda. You've also got some details in here in terms of the continued work around the Sustainable Communities for Learning schemes. So the work on Sir Richard Gwyn, Ascles Barrack, and the Centre for Learning and Wellbeing and St Nicholas projects being either in design or in construction within this quarter. Also wanted to highlight as well, as the leader did in terms of the Senior Community Development Officer, the work that is happening as part of the PSB's wellbeing plan in terms of mapping and understanding the needs within 3 of the most deprived lower super output areas within Barry as part of our commitment to looking at how we tackle deprivation by working differently and in partnership. And also building on the work of the More Than Food project within Llantwit Major, utilising the National Lottery funding that has been attracted by that project. I'm pleased that the preparatory work in St Athan to extend the food pantry offer and information and advice services within the village is well underway, and indeed will launch now early in the new calendar year. And we've also continued the work around Project Zero, most notably, I guess, within this quarter, the work that we've been doing in partnership to understand the voices of different parts of the community. So an event with the 50+ forum to understand the perspectives of older people in the Vale, but also a really successful event that was co-produced by the council, but also the council's youth council and cabinet, and that was attended and helped us understand the particular perspective of young people within that particular area of our activity. As always, when we're looking at the performance monitoring reports, we identify areas of activity that need further improvement based on the performance within the previous quarter. And you can see within the appendix that there's a number of areas that we want to push on in matters, as mentioned, in the financial position and the work that is being undertaken in order to make sure that we deliver as much of that savings programme in year as is possible. And there have been questions asked around schools' finances earlier on today. You can see as well some commitments within this particular part of the appendix around wanting to make some further progress on some of our transformation work and corporate landlord model, for example, as well as wanting to continue to focus on the number of apprenticeships that the council is able to support within the workforce. We also have identified that we want to take further work forward in terms of the Amplifying Prevention programme. That's the regional work that we do with Public Health and with Cardiff Council, particularly focusing in on Move More, Eat Well, childhood immunisations and bowel screening. So we want to do some further work on that, as well as then continuing the work on the integrated health and social care programme within Contact One Ven and Social Services, which is referred to as Wellbeing Matters. So there's a number of areas for improvement in terms of the service plan. And in response, as members will remember, we've included a new section within the report here that then talks about the emerging areas of development and activity. And these are things that are starting to come through the system, and we want to make sure that we're flagging for elected members. So you can see some details within the appendix on those things. So, for example, the continuation of strengthening public participation in the budget setting process. Matt was talking about member involvement. We'll be shortly going to consultation on the draft budget, and we want to make sure we hear the voices of as many people as we possibly can as part of the work to progress the medium-term financial plan review. We also want to continue some of the work around local colleges as part of our work around attracting and growing talent within the organisation. We're also referencing in here as well that there's going to be an increasing push on how we can replicate some of the learning from projects like the Llantryd Major one with other third sector partners, in order to support the community through the cost of living crisis as far as possible. And we'll continue as well the work around Project Zero, so taking forward with the Public Service Board partners their work on the Climate Emergency Charter, and also looking at bringing the Carbon Management Plan to committee early in 2024 as well. So there's some of the things that are emerging in terms of activity. And then finally, just as part of that appendix for you this evening, members, there's a section of emerging areas of concern. Again, these are things that we want to make sure that members have got visibility of. Matt has touched on all of the budget pressures. We also want to make sure that we continue to support elected members in your roles in terms of scrutiny and progressing that effective scrutiny action plan. We understand that we have serious challenges that remain within some service areas in the organisation in terms of attracting and retaining staff. That's been exacerbated by budget pressures and national skills shortages, as well as some of the market forces, but we know that we want to do more in terms of our offer as an employer. And then just finally to flag to you that you've touched on already the challenge within the current climate in terms of being able to respond to that commitment to be net zero by 2030, especially with that focus in on the supply chain. So that's the reason why Matt was highlighting the really important work that Ardal are doing with us in order to understand our supply chain emissions. So that's a really quick overview of the Q2 performance, but of course, happy to take any questions.
Thank you, Tom. Any questions from the committee? Councillor Lovelock Edwards, please.
Thank you, Chair. And if I may, it's a few comments for noting rather than questions. And this is just to say, Tom, that I think you've underplayed the securing the age-friendly status for the Vale. I know for a fact that it wasn't at the a mere whim of the WHO. There was a lot of work undertaken by your team, and I think it's only right that certainly my thanks are recorded, as I'm sure fellow councillors would want to, because increasingly, as you've already referenced, there are significant challenges facing us. And no one can underestimate that intergenerational process in terms of aging well and how we can help communities come together. to combat issues such as poor mental health, loneliness and isolation, which are all taking its toll and add to the pressures that people are feeling right now around the cost of living crisis and their ability to access help and support. So the efforts that you and your team are doing on that age-friendly status and expanding it out across the Vale, and in particular the work that you're doing in the rural Vale is most welcome. I'd like to sort of ensure that thanks are placed on are recorded for that work. And pass on my thanks to the team too for their efforts in getting us over that threshold, in meeting the requirements to be an age-friendly council. And I understand too that this is just the start of a process and start of a journey, and no doubt as the challenges come to bear on all of us in the coming months, that status and the work that we can do together in collaboration with the third sector and other agencies will obviously help communities at these desperate times. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Matt. Tom, would you like to respond?
Just to say thank you very much to Councillor Edwards. The team have worked incredibly hard on progressing that in partnership with a range of different people, and it was really pleasing actually that the age-friendly officer was invited to speak at an international event recently to share the experiences within the Vale. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Councillor Johnson.
Diolch yn fawr, Cadeirydd, jyst ar gyfer pobl yn yr stafell roi eiliad i roi clustffonau ymlaen. Creu bawb yn iawn. Di Matt yn iawn fyna? Ydy, siwr fod. Diolch yn fawr, Tom, am y cyflwyniad yna. Mae'n, fel dwedais ti ar y ddechrau, mae'n tipyn wahanol i'r un arfer yn nôl pob sôn oherwydd diffygion capacity a gobeithio fel dwedais ti a fydd hwn yn well. Gobeithio di pobl ddim wedi cael eu tynnu i ffwrdd i wneud yr asesiad blynyddol, hyn yn asesiad blynyddol sydd wrth gwrs yn llyncu llawer o gwaith gan yr adran fyna. Be sy'n dod allan felly fan hyn fel adroddiad wahanol yw ma'n fwy o narratif a llai o ystadegau. Fel arfer wrth i fi craffu'r adroddiad yma dwi'n edrych a dwi'n troi'n syth at yr eithriadau lle mae'n dadansoddiad ystadegol o lle ni'n methu am y pethau. Mae'n system goleuadau traffig sy'n dangos lle ni'n cyflawni a lle ni ddim yn cyrraedd ein targedu. Dyw hwn ddim yn bosib i bob pwrpas gyda'r adroddiad yma, felly dwi ddim quite yn clywed lle ni'n tan gyflawni a pa rannau, pa targedu ni ddim wedi cwrdd yn ystod yr ail chwarter o'r blwyddyn. Mae'n fwy hawdd efallai i gyfeirio at y pethau ni wedi cyflawni sydd yna, mae hwn yn help, ond ti hwn ar waelod yr adroddiad lle mae'n sôn am y pethau ni ddim wedi gwneud, lle i wella neu pryderon mae'n llai o fanyldir. Wi'n mynd i dynnu at yn ychydig o bwyntiau fel cwestiynau i Tom. Dau yn rhan o amcan 2 o lle pethau ni wedi cyflawni, pethau ni wedi cyrraedd, ynglyn â phobl ifanc a'r cronfa ffyniant gyffredin ac hefyd ar y data NEET, achos i fi mae hyn yn bach o waith heb cyd-destun. So mae'n sôn am y cronfa ffyniant gyffredin a'r faint o cyffwrddiadau sydd gan pobl ifanc gydag anabledd dysgu ac yn y blaen, ac eto am y data NEET. Ond dwi'n cofio'r gwaith yn cael ei wneud dan y trefn blaenorol falle gan Llamau neu ar y cyd gyda Llamau, felly dwi ddim yn glir i fi os mae hwn yn gwelliant i gymharu gyda'r gwaith blaenorol ar ran y gwaith cronfa ffyniant, neu ar ran y data, beth yn union, ar beth yw hyn yn beth yw'r data yma? Beth oedd ti'n megus i'w mesur rhwng 2002 a 2023? Beth yw haen 1, beth yw haen 2? Dwi ddim yn gwybod am beth ti'n cyfeirio fyna. Y cwestiwn, just pwynt yn gyffredinol am y wahaniaeth sydd gyda ni rhwng proses ac allbwn. Felly mae'n dda i ni apwyntio swyddog datblygu cymunedol. Dwi wedi cwrdd â hi salwau, dwi wedi mynd â hi o gwmpas Ward Buttrils i gwrdd ag aelodau'r cymuned, ond dydy hwn ddim yn allbwn eto, mae hwn just yn rhan o broses. So mae'n nais i gyflawni hyn, ond beth yn union yw hyn, a mae hyn yn arwain fi at y pwynt oilaf hoffwn wneud, sef lle rydyn ni ar ran prosiect zero, ar ran prosiect dadgarboneiddio'r cyngor cyn 2030. Wi ddim yn siŵr os dwi'n dyfynnu hyn yn gywir, os dwi'n cofio cofnodion cyfarfod pwyllgor archwiliad roedden nhw'n sôn am hyn fel rhywbeth arswydus, disastrous neu beth bynnag ar ran lle rydyn ni gyda hyn. Felly dwi ddim yn siŵr sut mae hyn just yn ardal pryder neu ardal cynyddol pryder. Sut ydyn ni'n mynd i gyflawni hyn ac heb cael y system goleuadau traffig, sut fyddwn ni'n gwybod fel aelodau'r pwyllgor yma lle yn union ar draws y cyngor ydyn ni'n methu a lle fydd angen targedu gweithred i ddatrys hon. Sut fydd hwn yn cael ei gwella'r i ni erbyn canlyniadau chwarter 3 ac i bob pwrpas Dyr Cadeirydd, sut ydyn ni'n gallu ymateb i'r cabinet ar hyn os nad yw'r manylion ar gael i ni dadansoddi a thrafod heddiw. Diolch yn fawr.
Can I briefly assist Councillor Johnson? The word you were looking for was catastrophic. That was being discussed at governance and audit. And that was a risk. And that risk is not necessarily one that has come out yet. It is one that needs to be mitigated indeed, but that is the potential of the risk. And I think that is fair to say that we didn't end up putting it as catastrophic, but I think it's fair to have that discussion for sure. Additionally, I think it should be noted that the reason that we don't have the RAG system in place for this report is due to challenges in corporate performance, part of which because they are attempting to deliver Project Zero. But noting that, I will ask for Tom to respond.
Thank you, Councillor Goujon, and thank you, Councillor Johnson, for the questions. Absolutely, in terms of the approach to the report this time, in terms of more narrative and fewer statistics, absolutely, you are right, and the focus of the committee, I know, is always on those exceptions. In terms of the narrative element of the report, where we've got the section around service plan actions and areas for improvement, that's drawn from those things that are the exceptions, but I completely appreciate that it's far more difficult to make the connections with those because you haven't got the statistics this time. You will have them at quarter 3 though. I can get you some more information in terms of the NEAT tiers from my colleagues in Learning and Skills, but there's a framework around those people not in education, employment or training or at risk of that, and it's a 5-tier system from what I can from what I know, with the tiers 1 and 2 being in effect the most significant areas of concern, either that young people are having intensive engagement and support work, or indeed that we don't know the status of those individuals, and then rising up to being the higher level, the sort of levels 4 and 5, where there's less intervention but just support. But I'll get you some further information and make sure that that's really clear. As the Vice Chair said, the Audit Committee did consider and ask for Cabinet to consider the the level of the risk around Project Zero and our ability to meet that commitment. Cabinet asked for the Project Zero board to do a full review of the risk, which we did at one of the board meetings recently, and I'm due to report corporate risk to Governance and Audit Committee shortly. The direction of travel for that risk is being recommended to be escalating, showing that we think it's getting riskier, but at the current time, considering that it's still at a high status rather than at that catastrophic level.
Thank you, Tom. Can I ask Councillor Johnson to follow up?
Diolch yn fawr. Diolch yn fawr, Tom. Wi just moyn dod nôl i'r pwynt am ddefnydd naratif, ac os mae'n rhywbeth i ystyried yn y dyfodol o ran sut ni, pa fath o eiriau ni yn defnyddio. Os wy'n just yn gallu cyfeirio at dau peth sydd yn amcan un o'r pethau i wella, achos ti wedi sôn am service plan activity, ni wedi clywed eisoes, mae'r dalen yma am cefnogi ysgolion sy'n adrodd cyllideb dylid. Ni wedi clywed eisoes heddiw am 19 o ysgolion sy'n parhau gyda'n, felly beth yn union yw cefnogi ysgolion ar ran rhywbeth i wella. Hefyd mae yna darn fan hyn datblygu'r adolygiad o adeiladau a enwau strydoedd a chofebion. Wnaeth y cyngor datgan hyn yn 20 tair mlynedd yn ôl. Felly mae hyn yn, o ran datblygu, rhywle i wella, ydy mae'n rhywle i wella. Felly dwi just, dwi'n sicrhau bod mae'n glir i ni os mae'n pethau yn digwydd neu ddim yn digwydd, a ddim cyfeirio at hyn fel rhywbeth, sydd i wella, ond sut mae hyn yn gwella. Dwi just ddim yn siŵr mae hyn yn rhoi'r darlun hollol gywir i ni fan hyn. Diolch.
Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. Well, I thank myself indeed. Councillor Johnson. Tom, please.
Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn, and I'll certainly make sure that the wording can be tightened up where and also expanded upon. So the areas of improvement in terms of service plan activity are exactly those things drawn from, as I say, the exceptions. So where things have slipped or not made progress to the extent that we would expect them to. I think it's perfectly fair feedback to say that we need to be explaining what the next steps of those things are. And in terms of the work on the building, street names and monuments review, I know my colleagues in Democratic Services have been canvassing for the names of some elected members and to be trying to put some dates in for bringing those people together so that we can look at the next stages of those. But due to some capacity issues, that hasn't progressed as much as we would have wanted to. We'll certainly make sure that we make some progress on that in the next quarter.
Quick follow-up, Johnson?
Dwi'n gallu. So just hoffwn gadarnhau gyda Tom. Oedd ti just yn dweud mae'r darn yma sydd yn lle wella yn dod o'r adroddiad eithriadau. Dych chi ddim yn dweud bod yr holl pwyntiau bwled fan hyn yn goch, ydych chi? Oedd hwn ddim yn taro fel mae'n gywir, ond falle mae yn. So, o'ch chi'n gallu cadarnhau fi, diolch.
Tom.
Thank you very much. They're not all exceptions, so they wouldn't all be classified as red in terms of the service plan actions or the measures, but they are things that would have an amber or a red status, and that we would want to make more progress than perhaps we had anticipated. They certainly wouldn't all be given a red status now.
Thank you very much. Any other questions or comments from the committee? No, I would like to make a couple points. So first off, can I very much thank Tom and his entire team for the work at the Climate Conversations event that I was proud to attend as the youth champion for the Vale of Glamorgan. I really do hope that this can be something that progresses onwards for a long time, as something that really improves our strategy as part of Project Zero, and one that doesn't only benefit this organisation, but in fact all organisations in Wales that choose to attend, that affect local services, as I'm sure there you can attest to. There was significant learning on all sides regarding the situation and the opinion of young people towards Project Zero and net zero commitments of public services. I did want to ask in particular what work is being done as part of the Public Service Board, between the Council and the Public Service Board, on Project Zero, because Project Zero is in particular a internal to this organisation scheme, one that we want to reach net zero by 2030. But obviously we are looking onwards towards 2050 as well, towards making the entire county of the Vale of Glamorgan net zero by that date as part of the UK's and Welsh Government's climate commitments. But do we know at all how much has been spent by the Public Services Board focusing on this target within Q2, and could you get that information, please? Because I suspect the answer is probably no. And in particular, I want to focus on the areas of improvement. How can you give us any information as to how you're working on improving the number of apprenticeships schemes within the council? Because this is one subject I'm particularly passionate on, trying to improve our officer base, our employees' skills range in a positive way that can support not only young people within our communities, but also the council as a whole, as a win-win situation.
Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. In terms of the query around the Public Services Board and what work has been done on Project Zero, the PSB has signed up and adopted a climate change charter. That's based on 3 different sets or themes of activity in terms of leading by example, taking positive action, and also looking at how organisations can reduce their impact. And the approach that PSB partners are taking is one in effect of a network or a movement of activity, so that each of the organisations who are partners to that Public Services Board are committed to undertaking activity in a coordinated and concerted effort. So they come together on a regular basis in terms of officers responsible for those activities, in order to share updates and progress, and where possible and appropriate to work together. But really what it's doing is trying to make sure that there's some coordination across the whole of the PSB partner landscape. The PSB itself doesn't actually have a very much of a budget, so it relies on the collective action of the organisations that are partners to the board. So I can certainly ask for the team to provide a bit more information in terms of some of the most recent progress against the charter, and I'll ask Project Services colleagues to circulate the charter to yourselves as well as committee, just for a bit more further information. In terms of the question around improving apprenticeship schemes and that offer within the council, something that my colleagues in HR and OD are working very strongly to do. We're currently looking through a process of workforce planning, where we're looking at the opportunities to develop skills and identify new ways of bridging potential gaps. Apprenticeships is a really important part of doing that. We're committed to bringing a younger cohort of colleagues into the organisation, and obviously apprenticeships is a big part of that, understanding the opportunities that we can take advantage of in order to use the apprenticeship levy. So certainly we can provide some further information on that, but that's the kind of current approach.
Thank you, Tom. There is reason why I ask about the Public Service Board, because this was set up partly in due to meet the requirements of the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act of 2015 here in Wales. And it's my understanding that when originally designed, the Public Services Board was intended to be a far more encompassing board that hopefully would transform our local services as a whole, and one that would bring well-being and sustainable development goals into every part of decision making of all public bodies in the local area. Now, not to downplay the work that the Public Services Board has done, but it certainly has not quite met up to the expectations of what they were particularly looking for when deciding the Public Services Board. So I appreciate your offer to circulate the charter, although I have read it before. I was looking for more specific actions currently being undertaken by the board, working towards the goal of the entire public sector of Wales being net zero by 2030, a lofty ambition indeed by the Welsh Government, to which these boards are intended to play a major role. And although, of course, resources are tight for us, working in partnership with all public bodies in the Vale provides a unique opportunity in order to reach these targets collectively, such as how we have signed the procurement agreement with other Welsh councils. Working together, we can hopefully both meet our budget requirements and our climate commitments. So, can you provide us with any more in-depth information as to the work of the Public Service Board within Q2, as you've mentioned it within the report? Sure, probably after the meeting indeed, but any more information would be greatly appreciated, because otherwise how can we be sure of the work of the Public Services Board is what we're looking for? And of course I'm aware of the annual report, absolutely, but we are getting to a point now with the climate crisis, with our deadlines getting closer and closer, 6 years and 20 days from now, effectively, we are to hit our commitment. So I think some more scrutiny outside of the yearly report would be appreciated.
Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. And yeah, certainly I can get some further information around the progress that is being made by that subgroup and reported to the Public Services Board for you. And I think if committee were minded to make a recommendation via Cabinet to the PSB that this is one of the areas that you would like to be scrutinised, particularly in terms of the PSB activity, we could certainly facilitate that and either bring it to be reported to your committee or indeed to Environment and Regeneration Committee.
Thank you, Tom. I think we can consider that as part of the Forward Work programme in a future meeting when there's perhaps more members of the committee here, but I think that's something that we definitely should consider, personally. Okay. Yes, of course, Councillor Johnson.
Sorry, just i ddod nôl eiliad at y pwynt o ran craffu'r bwrdd fyna. Mae'r pwyllgor yma wedi gofyn sawl waith ar gyfer cyflwyniadau gan y bwrdd, gan aelodau'r bwrdd, a ran y nifer o bynciau maen nhw'n gweithredu. A o hyn dwi'n cofio, dyn nhw ddim wedi dod yma, does dim byd wedi trefnu. Dwi wedi gweithio hyn, dwi'n gofyn hyn sawl waith yn ystod y 2 fis diwetha, felly pryd yn union fyddwn ni'n cael rhywun o'r bwrdd i drafod y pethau sydd yna. Diolch.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Johnson. And actually, considering those points, perhaps that is something that we should recommend now, considering the points that have been raised in the past. This is up to the committee to decide if they wish to do that, but I don't mind personally. Any response from Tom on work on that at all?
Thank you very much, Councillor Johnson. Yeah, you're absolutely right. And the Public Services Board had been notified of the consideration and the request from yourselves. What I'll do is I'll chase up to make sure that we do indeed put something into the work programme for scrutiny. I think there's definitely an opportunity around the work around tackling deprivation, certainly as you discussed this evening around Project Zero and decarbonisation as well. So we can certainly make sure that those go into the work programme, and perhaps Mark and Matt, you can make sure that goes on to the next agenda conference discussion as well, please.
Thank you, Tom. We'll definitely consider that 100%, and we'll follow up and report back to the committee. Okay, considering that work for us.
Sorry.
Oh no, so
Yeah, just sorry, just to nodi, wnes I ofyn hyn mis Rhagfyr llynedd, sef yr un cyfarfod o'r pwyllgor llynedd. It was suggested that members of the PSB be invited to speak to the committee or wider all elected members session regarding work key projects in order to raise awareness of the PSB and the wellbeing plan. So mae hwn yn flwyddyn yn ôl yn unig. Yeah.
thank you very much, Councillor Johnson. Okay, considering that and the work that we'll do internally within the committee and the officers liaising, I move that we note the annual delivery plan monitoring report, just to double check our recommendations, that we have considered the Q2 performance results and progress towards achieving the annual delivery plan 23-24 commitments and aligned to our corporate plan wellbeing objectives within the remit of this committee, and that we have considered the remedial actions taken to address areas of underperformance and to tackle the key challenges identified within the remit of the committee. Comments to Cabinet. I think we've got work to do within the committee. I don't know if we have any particular comments to Cabinet that members wish to raise, other than perhaps work on Project Zero and procurement, but I think we've already somewhat worked on that. So yeah, okay, we will make the comment again to Cabinet regarding procurement and the work, and perhaps a comment to Cabinet regarding the Public Services Board, and I hope to work further with them.
Sorry, Chair, can I just confirm the comment on procurement, please?
I'll work towards Project Zero and ensuring that we're working with other bodies as far as possible in order to reach our collective net zero agreements. Thank you. Okay, I would note. I would move that. Can I have a seconder? Councillor Johnson. Okay, thank you very much. Any objections? Otherwise, I'll move unanimously. Thank you very much. Okay, next we have our final substantive item on the agenda, a reference from Cabinet regarding the draft Vale of Morgan annual delivery plan for 24-25. Is Tom going to take us through that?
Yeah, thank you very much indeed, Chair. So, and thank you for taking this reference from Cabinet. This is as part of the consultation on the draft annual delivery plan of the ADP for 24-25. As members know, this is aligned to the Council's 4 wellbeing objectives, which are in the corporate plan, which runs until 2025. So this would be the final of the ADPs in that corporate plan cycle. So the corporate plan wellbeing objectives and the commitments for 24-25 are outlined in the draft ADP, which is attached to the reference, and they'll then be reflected within service plans to show how different services in the council contribute to the annual delivery plan itself. And as members will be aware, service plans and service improvement targets will be presented for the coming year to your committee in the new calendar year ahead of them being the work starting in April. The background to this is two pieces of legislation, the Wellbeing of Future Generations Act and the Local Government and Elections Act, both of which place specific duties on the Council in relation to our objective setting and performance reporting. So the ADP for 24-25 provides that bridge between the 5-year corporate plan and the annual service plans, and it details the key activities that will be undertaken in that final year of the corporate plan. In the current ADP, we've identified as an organisation 3 critical challenges around organisational resilience, around cost of living crisis, and around the climate and nature emergencies. And we consider that those things will continue into 24-25. The plan itself, to get to the drafting stage, has been developed through a series of discussions with the Council's Cabinet and the Strategic Leadership Team. We've also taken into consideration the Council's performance in progress in terms of delivering actions in the current ADP, the annual self-assessment report which Council considered in October, as well as our risk register, statutory duties, the likely availability of resources, the regulatory findings of the audit work programme, as well as the views of residents and partners and the contribution of the wellbeing plan itself. So we're at the stage now where Cabinet have approved the draft ADP for the basis of consultation. That consultation process is running from the 5th of December to the 11th of January and will be as wide-ranging as it is usually, including with the public, partners, staff, the trade unions, town and community councils, and including presentation to all 5 scrutiny committees. Upon receipt of the feedback, we'll then be amending the ADP in response, and it will be brought back to your committee members on the 21st of February. It'll then be considered by the Council's Cabinet on the 22nd, prior to consideration by full Cabinet, in order that it's in place for delivery from April. So we're now consulting on the draft plan. As I've described, we're also doing some work with the Council's Youth Service to make sure that we are engaging with young people. Just to draw out some particular areas of commitment that are within the remit of your scrutiny committee, within Objective 1, further work in terms of the public participation strategy, as well as strengthening our relationships with the third sector, social enterprise and town and community councils. And I know you had a report on your agenda last month in relation to that. Taking forward the digital strategy, our procurement arrangements in partnership with a focus on social value and climate change, and also the way that we're operating the council's buildings with a focus on sustainability and efficiency. In terms of Objective 2, that's around supporting learning, employment and sustainable economic growth. Again, working with our schools and partners to look at different ways of doing things to address budgetary challenges, as you've been discussing as a committee, as well as maximising the potential of the UK government's 10-year £20 million long-term investment plan for Barry and the Levelling Up Award as part of that whole town approach to regeneration and placemaking, as well as those town centre focused regeneration projects as well. In terms of Objective 3, around supporting people at home and in their community, we have commitments here around developing and supporting initiatives in response to the cost of living crisis, particularly focusing in on issues of housing, energy costs, food poverty, period poverty, debt, as well as access to benefits, employment and training for our residents. And then finally, within Objective 4, just to draw out the ongoing work in terms of the commitment to the Climate Change Challenge Plan. That's a really quick overview of the content of the plan at this stage. As I say, we are consulting on this now until until January. We'll then be bringing it back to your committee in February for you to consider it prior to Cabinet.
Thank you very much, Tom. Questions and comments from members of the committee, please. Councillor Johnson.
Diolch yn fawr, Dwr Cadeirydd. Yn jyst yn cadarnhau oedd neb mynd i neidio mewn o flaen fi. Mae Tom efallai wedi clywed y fath o sylwadau gan fi o flaen, a wnes i wneud hyn tipyn bach yn yr item blaenorol. Mae gyda ni 62 o frawddeg fan hyn. Does neb yn mynd i ddadlau yn erbyn y brawddegau yma, achos mae'r cyngor yn addo wneud pethau da. Dwi ddim cweit yn siŵr i pwrpas yr ymgynghoriad fydd yn diddorol i Tom ac i'r pwyllgor yma'r edrych yn ôl dros y 5 mlynedd diwethaf, er enghraifft, i gweld pa fath o newidiadau na pa fath o syniadau newydd daeth ymlaen, achos yr unig peth sydd gyda fi yw, dwi ddim yn siŵr pa fath o bethau sydd ddim yn cael eu cynnwys yn y 62 o frawddegau. Efallai mae rhyw grŵp penodol fydd yn sylwi ar rhywbeth sydd ddim yna, ond dyw e ddim yn glir pa fath o gwelliannau yn dod allan o'r ymgynghoriad, achos sa'n gweld unrhyw beth yma i ddadlau yn erbyn. Ond y dau peth, nifer o bethau sydd yn achosi problemau i fi, mae lot o hyn yn proses yn lle allbwn. Mae hwn yn natur y dogfen, bod dwi ddim yn gosod targedau, a felly mae'n anodd i ni gwybod i ba raddau roedd y cyngor yn llwyddiannus, a mae hwn yn fwy bwysig nag erioed, achos mae'n bwydo mewn erbyn hyn i'r hunan asesiad ac i'r sut mae'r cyngor yn gwneud yn asesiad o'r gwaith os mae hyn yn dibynnu ar gyflawni y 62 o brawddegau, neu 85% o'r 62 o brawddegau, mae hyn yn anodd i fi dadansoddi fel aelod wrth blaid yma. Felly dwi'n poeni braidd am pwrpas ymgynghori a sut mae hyn yn cael ei defnyddio ar gyfer hyn yn asesiad, achos gweithio mae hyn yn cyflwyniad eitha dar i'r llif gwaith a ffrwd gwaith y cyngor dros y blwyddyn nesaf, a mae'n helpu ni deall blaenoriaethau'r cyngor. Dwi ddim yn siŵr mae hwn o'r dogfen sydd yn helpu ni deall faint mor llwyddiannus ydyn ni fel cyngor. Diolch yn fawr.
Thank you. Can I bring Tom in to respond to that first, Councillor Lovelock-Edwards?
Yes, certainly, and thank you, Councillor Johnson, for the question. And your question is something that we've been discussing actually recently in the team, because obviously we're now starting to do some work in preparation for the next corporate plan, and questioning what the role of the annual delivery plan is, how does it sit, what's the usefulness for elected members, and I think when you were describing it as setting out the priorities for the organisation, that's exactly what this document is supposed to do, and the content of it has been informed by consultation exercises and other engagement and involvement work that's happening throughout the year in order to distill it into a set of priorities for us to going forward. In terms of the question around making sure that as elected members and scrutiny members that you vitally can see the progress that's being made, that's I think the importance then of the consideration of service plans and the associated targets in the spring. So when we bring those to you in February, we'll show the connections that each of those individual actions and targets make to delivering on the commitments within the ADP itself. I think the challenge then for us in reflecting on the feedback that we've had through the self-assessment this year is how do we present that as the evidence base for the judgments that we make in the self-assessment in a really accessible way that shows the workings, in order that we can demonstrate why we're reaching the conclusions that we need to do. And certainly it is something that I want to look at how we can potentially do differently now when we move into having a different or a new corporate plan, and obviously elected members will be a really important part of helping shape some of that work. So that's the kind of response that I was going to give.
Councillor Johnson, follow up, please, quickly.
Jyst yn gloi iawn, yn gloi iawn, Tom. Diolch am yr ymateb. Just pwynt o ddiddordeb I fi, a falle dyw e ddim rhywbeth a'i ystyried, dwi'n cyd-destun yr un fan hyn, ond falle bydd rhywle I drafod hyn. Ond wnaethon ni clywed yn gynharach llawr am yr her ariannol i'r cyngor, sut mae'r opportunity cost yn bwydo mewn i'r dogfen yma, achos os ydyn ni'n blaenoriaethu 62 o bynciau penodol fan hyn, pa fath o bethau sydd ddim yn cael eu cynnwys, what fell by the wayside, pam oedd pethau'n cael eu tynnu allan, pam mae'r pethau yma wedi cael eu cynnwys. Sa'n siŵr os ti'n gallu ymateb hyn fan hyn, ond rhywbeth I ddallai chi ystyried ar ran sut ydych chi'n esbonio hyn I gyngorwyr yn dyfodol, pam di pethau sydd ddim wedi cael eu monitro neu roi mewn. Diolch.
Tom, very quickly.
Certainly, and I think what Councillor Johnson is describing is part of the conversation that we have, and ultimately what we're looking to do here is demonstrate the breadth of the activity that the council is going to be delivering. In terms of the availability of resources, then that will then dictate the extent to which some of this can be taken forward. So it's a balance of both the priorities of the organisation, the breadth of the services, to make sure that we're reflecting the full range so residents are aware of that, and our ability then to put resource against each of those things, and that's the ongoing conversation that we're having.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Lovelock Edwards has waited very patiently. Thank you very much. If she wishes to speak. I did see her hand up. Yeah. 1 second, just press the button again, please, Councillor.
Can you hear me now, Vice Chair?
Yes, thank you very much.
Right. Thank you. Sorry, my fault. Yeah, I was just simply going to comment that I'm taking a different perspective, and surprisingly, to Councillor Johnson on the format of this document, and he uses the term is sort of how we measure how successful we are as a council. Well, for me, quite frankly, if what this document demonstrates is that we've allowed even one schoolgirl to go into school without the sort of fear of having to be able to use period products, and given her period dignity, rather than having to rely on newspaper or toilet tissue, which sadly a lot of young girls have had to do in the past, then that to me is the sign of a successful council. If we're allowing or giving the opportunity for mums and dads who've had to skip breakfast or lunch to go to a warm space to receive a hot drink or soup and a roll, to me, that's a successful council. I think it's difficult for us to put that into any statistical analysis in terms of evidence, other than the fact that I will do all that I reasonably can as a councillor to safeguard sort of the warm spaces, the period dignity, and the health and well-being initiatives that this council have been driving forward. Right now, as Councillor Johnson is all too aware of, as other councillors here this evening, the cost of living crisis is having such a detrimental impact on those that we represent. And to me, any initiative that gives someone some dignity and the ability to play a part of their community, to attend school, to be there for their kids, then that surely is a sign of a successful council. So, I just wanted to make that comment this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Tom, do you want to come in on that?
I think that was more a comment than a question. Thank you, Vice Chair.
Yeah, just if you wanted to say anything, but thank you very much. Any other members of the committee before I give my 2 pence? I see none. So personally, I do think there is scope for reform, definitely, as Tom stated, as part of the next corporate plan. I think we do need to focus more heavily on smart targets, on targets that we know we have achieved or failed, on performance indicators that are more directly linked to each target that we have. I think the current plan is very similar to last year's plan because broadly the challenges are the same on most aspects, and we have plans in place for each of those aspects, which is fantastic to state, but as a broader goal for each one, perhaps it's not the easiest way, especially with the new legislation in from the Local Government Act that works for the annual self-assessment. So I do appreciate the work that Tom's team need to do with the next corporate plan to make that work in a matter that perhaps works a little bit better with the new legislation. So I definitely approve of that, just as a comment. Additionally, I would say that our critical challenges, I think there's one that we are missing out. So at the moment is organizational resilience, cost of living crisis, Project Zero. But I think the recent Let's Talk About the Vale survey, Let's Talk About Life in the Vale, has highlighted another key issue that has arisen since the pandemic. And I think that's public trust and public engagement. Now, we have a public engagement plan, that's public engagement strategy. However, I think this has become a key challenge with some of the figures that we found in that survey. And I think I did mention this in a previous meeting, it was either here on governance and audit, that perhaps our communication with residents has become to such a point that we need to make it a critical challenge, because we're at a point where public trust is so low in politicians, so low in the public sector, simply because of not even the actions that have taken place here, but the actions that have taken place nationally so far out of our control, that we are at a situation that when public services are in, let's be honest, a poor order because of the financial situation, that we are struggling to properly communicate and understand the needs of our residents. So personally, I would say that we need to consider having public engagement as a critical challenge alongside the rest. I don't know how the rest of the committee feels, or Tom feels about that, but that would be my comment. Tom, do you want to respond, or anyone else?
Thank you, Vice Chair. Certainly very happy if the committee were minded to make that a recommendation as part of your consideration as part of the consultation work. We are going to be reporting the results of the Let's Talk About Life in the Vale survey very early in 2024 as well, and extracting a lot of the learning that is coming out of that. And I'd expect that definitely to be reflected within the annual delivery plan. And I guess the consideration that we need to give is how that cuts across all activity of the organisation. But certainly if it was something that the committee wanted us to consider as part of the consultation, of course we'd do so.
Thank you, Tom. I personally would like to make that a recommendation. However, I am minded to the thoughts of the committee on that. Councillor Johnson.
Dwi'n hapus i eilyddio hyn. Dwi'n gallu ragweld... Sorry, dwi'n mynd i ddechrau eto. Dwi'n hapus i eilyddio hyn, ond dwi'n gallu ragweld sut mae hyn yn ffitio mewn i organisational resilience. Ond eto mae yna pwnc i drafod ac i godi. Dwi'n ddim rhywbeth sydd yn unigryw i Fro Morgannwg, ond mae yna her sydd yn yr, a felly dwi'n credu o leiaf dylen ni cael rhyw fath o ymateb call, achos mae hwn wrth gwrs di dod allan, mae'n dod nôl actually i'r hynna'n asesiad, achos mae hwn yn pwynt sydd wedi codwyd a godwyd gan cynghorwyr yn y trafodaeth llynedd ac eleni ar sut mae cyngor yn ystyried a'i perfformiad yn wahanol i'r cyhoedd sy'n ymateb i'r holiaduron ac yn y blaen. Felly, by'n ddiddorol i weld rhyw ymateb swyddogol i'r her yna rhywsut i fewn y system yma. Falle critical challenge na rhyw ffordd arall, ond dwi'n hapus eilydd o mewn cyd-destun y pwyllgor heno. Diolch.
I certainly note the comments of Councillor Johnson regarding organisational resilience. Personally, I'm just of the opinion that it's reached past that point as being encompassing in that one challenge, but I thank him for seconding. On that point then, do we have any objections to that being a recommendation? I see none, yeah.
No, just to say, Chair, obviously as part of the recommendation that that those comments will be fed back to the Director of Corporate Resources, so they'll inform the provisions of the delivery plan. It won't be necessarily go into Cabinet. Okay, just to confirm that.
Yes, of course, as this is a reference, that's the proper procedure, and we will see this document again before it is finalised. So we will see what comes out of that. So, right then, regarding recommendations, I move that recommendation that we have just stated. I think that's passed without objection. Fine, and additionally, we will note the contents of the draft report and to say that we have considered its contents. Seconded by Councillor Johnson. Just checking there's no objections. Final chance. No, thank you very much. Okay. In that case, I have no items which are urgent under part 1 or part 2, and therefore I declare this meeting closed. Thank you very much. And can I quickly state thank you so much to the Democratic Services team and our translator for today. This is the first time we have had a translator for a committee meeting under the hybrid system. And quite frankly, I'm impressed by how quickly we're able to sort out any technical issues. And it worked very smoothly through the rest of the meeting. So thank you very much.